Okay, guys, so our final philosopher of this semester is English 250, Introduction to Literary Studies. We watched Hamlet at the beginning, and then we had three units: Art and Reality, Art and Authors, Art and Audience. And now we have Walter Pater, who is a guy who's going to close us out and finish the semester for us. Walter Pater is not a guy most people care about. He's somebody I care about a lot. Most people don't know who he is, and they don't take him very seriously. Most of the guys, the people I gave you, are pretty famous, but Pater's a little less famous. Walter Pater was Oscar Wilde's teacher at school, at Oxford, which is also where I went to school. And Walter Pater lived in about like he was in the 1880s, 1890s, and he was or 1870s, I guess. Um, so Walter Pater was a very quiet little man. Really kept to himself. Um, and he was gay, and he didn't want people to know, so that's certainly one reason why he was kind of shy and didn't, talk to people too much. And he wasn't. Oscar Wilde was big and bold and caused a lot of trouble, and Walter Pater was his teacher, and Pater was a quieter person. Um, Pater, he was really like an art critic was his job. He talked about paintings. He wrote this book called The Renaissance, which is it's like an art book about art appreciation uh, of paintings by people you've heard of. He wrote a book about paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, by Michelangelo, by Raphael, all those Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle artists. So, and by the way, those people are relatively the same time and sort of the same places as Shakespeare. It's Italy, but it's, and it's not quite the same century, but it's close. It's like part of the same kind of, I don't know, it's roughly the same time and continent. So, Pater wrote a book about paintings. It's a short book, by the way. It's called The Renaissance. I think it's a great book. I think it's a wonderful book. It's about 70 pages long. What's one of my favorite books ever written. In it, it was divided into chapters, and each chapter is about a different artist. Chapter on Leonardo da Vinci, chapter on Michelangelo, chapter on Raphael, whatever. So he has in the book he talks about the Mona Lisa, like one of the most famous books, one of the most famous paintings ever made. Um, and it's a book about like how beautiful and lovely these paintings are, and that's it. Um, but the book is a little strange. It's an odd book because he's not really doing history. He's telling you why the paintings are very beautiful, but his writing is very beautiful. There's no way to really explain this except to say that Walter Pater is essentially writing poetry about the paintings. Now, they're not real poems. They're just, it's supposed to be like an art history book. But the way that he writes is so incredible. It's like you're reading a poem. His description of the Mona Lisa was so beautiful that a poet named William Butler Yeats chopped it up into pieces and said it's the first modern poem. It's not a poem, it was just like an art history book. But Pater's such a beautiful writer that William Butler Yeats said that it's like a real poem. So, um, and I could read that to you, but I think I'm not going to do that right now because we're about to do a lot of Walter Pater, and this is really the best thing he ever wrote. So the passage I have for you to give to you guys by Walter Pater is I'll probably put it on the blog. I'll just drop it on the blog post or whatever. It is maybe I'll link to it. I can find it online. It's the conclusion to the book. So he wrote a very short book, about 75 pages, about, paintings from, the 1600s by very famous Italian painters. Um, and he just talked about how beautiful the paintings were, and that's it. And he put a conclusion at the end of that book. He put a 5 paragraph conclusion. You pretty much have all of it. I'm going to give it to you the whole thing. It's very short. It's really just like a little thing. He wrote a 5-page conclusion. He just I don't know. It's beautiful. I mean, it's a gorgeous piece of writing. That's hard to hear. You're going to have a hard time hearing how beautiful it is because it takes training to hear how beautiful words can be. And most of you guys haven't spent enough time with works like this to enjoy them. It takes a certain amount of training to kind of enjoy it, but try. And Pater wrote this 5-paragraph conclusion that was so beautiful. And he was really just kind of explaining why art matters. And then he published his little art history book, and that should have been the end of it. But people thought, the undergraduates at the school got this book, and they loved it. They thought it was the coolest fucking thing they had ever seen. At the undergraduates at Oxford, including Oscar Wilde, was just like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Oscar Wilde became obsessed with it, and a lot of Oscar Wilde's career is coming out of Walter Pater, who was his teacher. Pater, and here's the thing: the students were really excited about the last 5 paragraphs. It's called the conclusion to the Renaissance. It's literally just the conclusion to this little art history book. They were really excited by the conclusion to the Renaissance because they thought it was the most radical thing they had ever seen, and it is. It's an incredibly radical thing, and it's dangerous. It is a radical and dangerous couple of paragraphs. And poor Walter Pater did not want all of this attention, and he did not mean to be a dangerous, radical, crazy person. He was just a quiet little art history professor, and this thing blew up. It's like it went viral, and people lost their fucking minds. And it was so scandalous, it upset so many people, they made him remove the conclusion in the next edition. They said, you can't put that in there, and they made him get rid of it. But we have it here. And we're going to look at it together. And here's the thing: there's a couple of things that's hard to see. Number one, you're not going to see why it upset people at first. It takes time to see what's so radical and dangerous about Walter Pater's conclusion to the Renaissance. The other thing is it's extraordinarily beautiful, so you have to kind of listen to the music of it. It's a hard thing to do. The only way to do it is to read it out loud slowly, many, many times. Also, Walter Pater it's hard to read. It has long sentences, they're windy sentences, they have some tough vocabulary, so it's a little tricky. It would take some time to really work with it, but it is an extraordinary thing, the conclusion to the Renaissance. And that is where I would like to end the semester. I was when I was at NYU, getting my undergraduate degree, and I went to Oxford for my PhD, or my doctorate. When I was at NYU, I was a philosophy major. Reading Walter Pater's conclusion to the Renaissance changed my life. Now, I've given you some people I like a lot. Freud is one of my favorite thinkers. Harold Bloom is a guy that I wrote 2 books about, basically. And he's in my film class is based off of Harold Bloom's theory, but my life is based off of Walter Pater's theory. In this piece of philosophy, when I read this thing, I was like, "Holy shit!" And I went to my advisor and I said, "I'm going to be an English major now." I was a philosophy major, and I ended up double majoring in philosophy and English because they were like, "Jeff, you've taken a lot of philosophy classes. Why don't you major in both?" So I did. And you can see that I still care about philosophy, obviously, because look at this class. I'm teaching you all these philosophers, and I teach Plato to my 101 kids, and so fun. But reading Walter Pater was a kind of the 5, and really, I just mean these 5 paragraphs, where it was a life-changing experience. I was like, holy shit, I got to live my life differently. I won't be an English major. Philosophy and philosophy matters to me, but it has forever mattered less. So, all right, I think that's a pretty exciting introduction to Walter Pater. Let's talk about structure a little bit. So Walter Pater's conclusion to the Renaissance. It's long. I may have cut a paragraph out. I feel like it's 5 paragraphs. I think you only have 4. Although I think actually maybe no, you have the whole thing. This is the whole thing. I think I'm missing a paragraph break, but the words are here. So he says in the first paragraph, "Let us begin with that which is without." And then in the next paragraph, he says, "Or if we begin with the inward world of thought and feeling." So what Walter Pater does is he says, let's talk about the universe. So let's start by talking about the universe that is without, meaning outside of you. Let's talk about the sun and the trees and the water. And then he does a whole paragraph about that. And he says, can we find anything in there that's stable? No. Then he says, let's go in here. Let's talk about what is within, the world within. Is there anything stable in here? So that's the first 2 paragraphs. He's basically like, let's look at the outside world of the universe and see if we can find something stable, something real. Can't do it. Then he says, let's look in here. Let's look in ourselves for something real and something stable. And then he says, once again, can't do it. So this is where Walter Pater gets started. It's a strange thing to have a little art history textbook and to decide to say, is there anything stable in the universe? Is there anything stable in your soul? And to answer no on both counts. But that's how he starts. Okay, let's take a look at it in the next video.